Hello, welcome back to the JRB podcast with myself, Ryan Levine, joined here by Jeff Jones and Bohdan Temnick.
What's up?
Yo.
Hi, so today we're going to talk about just a brief overview of Cyberstorm Access. I don't think we're going to go quite as in depth as we did for Photon Hypernova, where we just spent literally 2 hours going over quite literally every single notable card. For one, I don't think there are as many notable cards in this set, probably. And two, we have other stuff we want to talk about, so we're not going to hopefully spend 2 hours on it. Then we're going to talk about predictions and thoughts on a potential ban list update. It looks like it's around that time. There's a new set coming out. We're about to hit into WTQ season, and there's probably some cards people don't want to play against that we can talk about. But I guess let's jump into it first of all with Cyberstorm Access. So I have not looked into this set as much as I probably have for prior sets. I don't know if it's just because I'm just bored or not as interested as I probably have been previously. But my overall thoughts about this set is it doesn't seem super strong. There are there are a few notable cards as always, but this seems I guess because we just had banger sets in Power of the Elements, Darkwing Blast, Photon Hypernova, cards that completely reshaped everything. This seems more of a maybe a Battle of Chaos or Difo tier set where it's there are a couple key cards, that make some decks significantly better, but I don't think we're gonna see a crazy overhaul of the meta unless we also get a ban list. But what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so this set to me, so there are three different kinds of sets for me. One is the kind of set that is basically just it's completely awful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the sets like Pote, which are completely changing, format changing, right? Then you have something like Cyberstorm Access, which when you have something like this, many times what happens is it's a set that has a lot of good cards spread among way too many different deck types. So if you look, is a little bit of everything or there's a little bit of stuff for just so many things. So you have firewall support, then you have here's some ice jam cards, and then you have here's an infinitrack card and mana dome card, super heavy samurai, um Bestial, Libromancer, Gold Pride, and with sets like this, if you look at these cards individually, most of these cards are you read them these cards are pretty good. You definitely play these cards in the decks that they're meant to be played in. However, because the set isn't really concise and everything is spread too thin, it makes it seem weaker. Whereas when you have sets like Pote, you have very clearly two very strong decks with a lot of cards, and in this it's like 20 decks with strong cards.
With
So that
two
makes it seem,
cards, yeah.
yeah, with two cards each, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
one or two. Um and so it's kind of weird. It makes the set seem bad. If you read the cards themselves, you're gonna read all these cards in the set, and you're like, yeah, this card is pretty good or pretty strong, but it's not Pote level because decks didn't get 7, 10 cards or whatever each.
Yeah.
And
I'd
yeah,
also argue that something like Pote and even Darkwing Blast to a certain degree also had more obvious staple type cards. Ultimate Slayer and Divine Cardo didn't really take off to the levels people thought they would. We saw Divine Cardo get played more recently, and I'm sure Ultimate Slayer will have its day. It's just right now you just can't even activate it against Arise Heart, so why that card can't be in your deck.
yeah.
But then you also had Garura, which was a staple, and I'm even going to go far as to say Elf was just a staple in literally every deck, not even just in the
You don't even have to
whatever.
go far.
Yeah,
That card is just its card
yeah,
was Nightmare Goblin. Let's be real.
yeah. And then for Darkwing Blast, the Bistals were pseudo staples, where they're not really played now, but
There's
obviously they
lots of
were
generic
very
cards that are very
splashable.
strong.
Yeah, and this set, I kind of agree. I think this set does kind of lack the splashability that those sets have, and we have seen pretty poor sets get carried on those generic cards, Pot of Prosperity, really made Blazing Vortex not just the worst set ever. And then we had Rise of Duelists get both Talents and Droplet, and stuff like that. And The closest I can see to that in this deck or in this set is like the Apple Dragon thing and
No,
Chaos Angel, but
yes,
we
yeah,
can talk
Chaos
about that
Angel.
more specifically later. But sorry,
Chaos
Bowden, I
Angel
know,
to me is the huge one. Yeah.
yeah. But Bowden, do you have any like overall thoughts on this before we move on to specific cards?
Uh, no, really hit the nail on the head. I'm not like disappointed in it, but I
Hmm.
feel like it's not the shakeup required. And I don't know. Like
That's fair.
Japan had like the big thing with tier for an extended period of time compared to what we were at. Like we transitioned quite smoothly despite having like similar hits, I guess, if you could argue that.
Mhm.
But it seems like the format is still doing the same thing it was before for the most part, with just some more like imbalance decks that are doing ignorant things. So I agree. I think without a ban list, this set might just fall flat. Feels like Difo, you
Yeah,
know?
I think that's exactly. I think yeah, I think Difo is something that like I guess to draw more parallels to Difo. That I don't think Difo is a particularly weak set.
Mm.
It just like Therian Regulus was an incredible card, and so
Mm.
was the Punk Deer Note. And Deer
Hmm.
Note saw play in a ton of decks,
Yeah.
and the Therians were tried and then eventually dropped, and like we've kind of seen them pop in and out. And like Regulus is a card that like I picked up a playset eventually, and like I've owned that card because I feel like it could very easily be played again at any point, right? And it's like, yeah, but it never quite took off, and I think yeah, a lot of trends the same in this one. Which let's start with probably the most hyped cards in Cyberstorm Access, which are shockingly also two commons, the Purrelys.
Mm-hmm.
Also, rarity distribution of this set, not exciting? Question mark. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but it's like I was looking at the rarities in this set and just like all the cards I
It's
thought were good were not high rarity, and it's like, oh, that's good for people that like want to get them, and then I'm like, but at the same time, it's like bad if you're
it's it,
actually
it's
buying the set. It's like,
it, it's just straight up bad. So
yeah,
the thing is like it doesn't matter if like cards are easy to get for people in the long run. What's most healthy is that people want to buy this, so stores will sell it. If this is
yes.
just sitting
Mm-hmm.
on shelves in stores, stores get fucked over, and it feels really bad just to have to invest a lot of money in a product and just have it sitting on your
Mm.
shelves untouched. Um,
When you look at
so
a set and it's like the most expensive card in this set is $45 and a box
Mm-hmm.
costs 80 or 90, it's just like,
It's
yeah,
weird
it's
though,
tough.
because you figure the answer to like a situation like that where you want to have your low end be accessible for everyone within reason, and your top end is the cosmetics, right? Like the Starlight Res and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
obviously, the trend we've seen is just like Starlight Res that it just very lackluster and generally incorrect picks, right? Like that's a big one. Ryan can scream for 10,
I've
20 hours
literally
about
have I could
why
write an
Starfrost.
essay about why I
Yeah,
don't.
exactly.
Yeah.
But
if
so
you're
like,
going to
okay,
make
how
a card a Starlight, make it a
just
Starlight
do
in
it
their own
before,
set.
yeah.
Don't do Visa Starfrost and
Also from
DP.
Difo. Haha.
Yeah,
So what do
yeah.
you
This really
guys
is just
think?
Difo. It even has Visa
What do you think the
Starfrost in it.
solution is? Like, how do you solve it? Because we've seen sets like Battles of Legends, Crystal Revenge, obviously not like a parallel with a core set, given the different distributions of rarities and stuff like that. But would you think putting more Starlight Rares in a set and just having the cosmetic bumps would make core sets better? Would it devalue other Starlights? Like
We're about to
getting a
find
unique
out.
Starlight Rare.
I
Yeah,
would
no,
say we're
exactly.
about to
But
We
find
we
out.
are
Yeah.
about to
no,
find out.
you know what I like. No, but like, is that solving it? Do you think that's
I
going to
don't
make?
think that alone
No,
will solve it, but I do
I don't
think it
either.
could be. I think it could be better than what's happening now, and we
Oh
will
no,
find
but
out
like
soon.
anything is better
So
than
I
where we're
don't
at
want to.
now. I'll agree with
Yeah,
that.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, for those of you who are not sure what we're talking about, it's already been announced that the next Battles of Legends set, and I think they also said Dueling
Duelist,
Nexus,
Dueling
Duelist
Duelist
Nexus,
Nexus is
yeah.
the
Nexus
first one that has
also,
like the spread of
yeah,
25th anniversary
they
rare.
they will have 25 quarter century rares, which we do not know how they will be distributed. Like I'm gonna go on record saying I would think there is no way possible the distribution will be the same as Starlight's, because if you get if you get one quarter century secret rare every other case, and there are 25 different ones, that would that would actually just be the craziest thing ever. So I will go on the record, I can't fathom it will be the same scarcity as Starlights. Like that would just sound so crazy to me. But
I'm just going to assume it's going to be one per case.
yeah, I was thinking it would probably be something like that, or because there are so many, maybe closer to collector rare distributions. But yeah, that's also what I kind of would gather. But we'll know soon. Just in a couple months, we're gonna have Battles and Duelist Nexus, and then presumably the next 3 core sets after that will be under the 25th anniversary branding. Will also probably have that same spread. So we'll get more or less a year of sets. At least up until February, I believe, is like the official end, allegedly, of the quarter century anniversary or whatever. So at least until February, all the sets will probably follow that distribution, and we'll see if that helps or if it hurts and whatever. But yeah.
And just like a random note, so like as far as like choosing what cards become the 25th anniversary rare, I think it's probably going to be, so if you look at how sets are spread out, there's 10 secret rares and 14 ultra rares, which adds up to 24. And then the last card would just be an import card, right?
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense if they just did it
So-
that way.
So I think it would just be like all the secrets, all the ultras, and then whatever the import card they put in.
I wouldn't
Hey, that's
hate
just
that.
how Japan does it.
That is
right?
how Japan does it. Yeah. Sort of. Well, they don't have.
Well, Japan
it's a little
has,
different. Yeah.
like a secret,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah, because secret rares in Japan are not their own rarity. They are a
Yes.
cosmetic.
They're a
Even-
rarity.
yeah.
Even
right?
super rares in Japan can be secret rare.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
In Japan, the core rarities are common. I think they still have rares, super and ultra, and then all supers can come as secrets, all ultras can come as secrets, and all ultras can come as ultimates.
Yes.
Yeah. So like secret rare is not like its own rarity. It's like a cosmetic upgrade to the other foils in the set. So, and then now, yes, all of the super and ultras can also come quarter century rare in Japan. That is, I believe, how they did it for Duelist Nexus. So that would check out. That would make a lot of sense. And then maybe we'll. So yeah, that would make sense if they do all the secrets, all the ultras, and then the one like reprint Starlight. That would be pretty good actually. Assuming again they pick good cards. But whatever. Let's just move on for that. Yeah. So anyway, back to Purrely.
Back to Super Heavy Sam. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Purrely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the Purrely cards are commons, right? They're both of them, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So thoughts on that? On them being commons? I think it's bizarre they're commons because they were all collector's rares in the core
this is
set.
my biggest pet peeve, because whenever they do this with Exo Sisters and Live Twins, whenever they put a card
and Labyrinth, they did it all 3 times actually. They did it for Live Twins. They gave Live Twins 3 Starlights. They gave Exo Sister 2 Starlights, and they gave Labyrinth a Starlight.
The fact that this Purrely is not an ultra like the other Purrely and a Starlight rare is I'm
mind-blowing.
so distraught. I'm
yeah.
so distraught.
Distraught is a good way to, yeah. I agree. Yeah. It just seems bizarre that it's so, I think it's so funny when you look at, and all 3 of those
and
decks
this Purrely
even,
is like almost better than the other Purrely
Yeah.
most times. Like it's not like the other regular Purrely's not once per turn, but like starting off your turn like with oh my god, and the name change. Don't even get me started on the name change.
Purrely.
Purrely.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever it
Like,
is.
Oh god. All right, just go ahead. I need to.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, it's just bizarre to me to look at the rarity distribution. When you look at it, you might think in a vacuum like, oh well, I guess it didn't work out for all the other decks, and then you think back and you're like, Live Twin was played and very expensive, and people like that deck, and Exo Sister was played and won OICS and was pretty expensive, and people like that deck. And Labyrinth was played and like did quite well at some events recently and was very expensive, and people like that deck. And it's like, then the good Purrely card comes out and they're like, no, common. And I don't know. It's weird. I'm just curious to know what the reasoning was to not stick with that trend. Because I don't hate, or like I actually liked the trend of the collector's, like the set they pushed the most in the collector's rare sets getting more starlights as it went on. Because that's kind of what Bohdan was talking about earlier, where he's like, well, the top end should probably be like the cosmetic upgrades, and it was creating these decks that do have the top end cosmetic upgrades that were reasonably playable, and they were not the best decks. They were not, tier 0. You had to play them and you had to get them in the high rarity, but they were competent, and if you wanted them in the high rarity, you could get them, and some people like that. And just, it's weird to give Purrely 5 collector's rares and then make both the support cards commons.
That are better
I
than
don't,
some of the,
I don't quite get it. I would have assumed they would have made the spell an ultra to match the spells, and then I would have assumed they would have made the monster ultra and then also made the monster starlight. But whatever. And then we know there'll be more Purrelys in Dueling Nexus.
It is not whatever.
No, I agree, it's not whatever, but we can't change it. It's like there's nothing we can do now. Anyway, so let's focus less on the rarity and more on the actual application of the cards. So obviously sleepy memory, insane card, very strong. And then I guess this is probably going to be the question that we ask to every single CYAC card that we're going to talk about for the next 45 minutes is going to be, but can it beat Kashtira though? Like, if your opponent summons an Arise Heart and you look at your hand of 6 Purrely cards, can you win? And I'm not convinced the answer is yes. But do either of you have thoughts on that?
If your hand is, if you activate a field spell, it forces a Rise Heart, basically. So that's a lot of thing that Purrely has going for it. And also the fact that Purrely also gets to use a lot of non-engine cards, makes it also is very similar to Kashtira in that vein, because Kashtira gets all these spots for like these support or flex spots, and the same goes for Purrely, where they play with one card and then they have things like tactics, so you can use like Dark Ruler no more, like the hand traps and stuff like that. So it's very, very flexible. I think that Purrely is like pretty well positioned into Kashtira, actually. Obviously any deck can just lose to like a Rise Heart, multiple back row, or hand traps. That's just the way Yu-Gi-Oh is right now. But I don't think Purrely has an overbearingly hard.
Doesn't have it worse than anything else.
Yeah, than
right?
everything else. Yeah.
Okay, sure, that's fair. Bohdan, do you have any thoughts on that? Or
what?
Okay, it's fine.
Kashtira? What?
No,
No, like everything is bad into Kashtira.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. Like, that Kashtira deck shouldn't exist. Like.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. And then as far as like, so okay, this is my main issue with I'm just gonna do some armchair theory here, as I've obviously played 0 games of Purrely versus Kashtira or anything versus anything with Cyberstorm Access legal. But the way I see it, right, we've seen this cycle of the Kashtira boards going wide. Everyone was like, oh my god, they're gonna lock all your zones, and then the event, and then I think like at Mexico City, that is what we did. Because Nibiru was not great against like Tier Elements. We just tried to lock zones every single time and like did a wide board, and they couldn't win usually. Then everyone's like, oh my god, Kashtira is the only good deck. Like, there was a ban list, and now everyone's gonna lock all your zones. Like, you have to play Sphere Mode, you have to play Lava Golem, you have to play Nibiru. And then the next event, we just made a Rise Heart, right? And like everyone just made a Rise Heart, and then all those cards were terrible. And then it sort of was like, okay, when everyone's just making a Rise Heart, Kaiju's are really good, and like, going wide sucks. And then the next event, we saw people making 2 Arise Hearts. It's like, because that was like the level of extension that you could still have cards for follow-up, but not auto lose to like, like a 1 Kaiju or whatever. And then now with that, it's like people are like, okay, maybe we go back to Lava Golem, like maybe like evenly match is something to consider again, because it just puts them on 1 Arise Heart, whatever, right? And then we've just seen these weird cycles of cards being good and cards being bad, and the Kashtira decks adapting. And now we're throwing a Purrely into it, which is a deck that more or less will draw 2 to 4 cards and make a towers. And what do you do again? You can't play Lava Golem against that, right? Like, you can't play you can't go wide. You can't play the wide cards against that. The only things that beat that are the single target cards like Xyz Encore, the Kaiju, Herald of the, or whatever what's that card called? Pay 15
Herald of
life.
the Abyss.
Herald of
But
the
that card is
Abyss.
not even that good because you can play around it like almost
I
all
agree.
the time.
I agree. And it's just like, then we see these cards being the cards everybody's leaning towards. And then in my mind, what that makes me think is I go, I'm just going to play Kashtira and lock all their zones. Because, that's what that is, right? Like if everybody, and it just brings us back to the point where now you're no longer trying to play the guessing game of what Kashtira board your opponent is trying to make. Now you're playing the guessing game of what Kashtira board they're trying to make and what deck they are playing, Because if you're going to main stuff like Sphere Mode and Nibiru, and then your opponent just summons a Purrely card and just makes a 70 material Noir and draws 4, what do you do with those cards? Nothing. You lose, right? Like the game is over. And then if you have a Kaiju and your opponent, locks all your zones and makes 2 Arise Hearts, and you look at your 1 Kaiju, like what do you do? Nothing. Like you probably lose. So it just seems now we're back, between a rock and a hard place, not just trying to play the Kashtira guessing game, but just, and then there are more decks also that we're going to go into. But that's how I feel it with just the first baseline level of Purrely and Kashtira. But
yeah, I agree. I also think we spent too much time talking about 2 Purrely cards.
I did. I agree.
This ain't the Purrely podcast today.
Yeah. All right. So I don't know, but do you have any closing thoughts on Purrely? Or I don't think there's that much, nothing's reinventing the wheel. But if you have anything that we neglected, feel free to.
I mean, it's just you have anywhere from 9 to 15 flex spots. It's the same as every other deck. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think so. It's gonna play into the trend, of a Rise Hot Pass where it's kind of exploitable. But obviously there's ways to sort of mitigate it and set up boards that function in certain ways and place certain hand traps that help with those trends. But maybe for Philly or a European nationals or something, early into CYAC coming out, you might see Purrely get exploited pretty early. And then obviously it'll be more resilient as time goes on. I think it's a pretty good deck. It's very adaptable to how people are sort of approaching it and stuff like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah. I think its adaptability is where I think it'll really shine, where when the format gets a bit more defined and you can really just hone in on the decks you want to beat. I think Purrely is one of those decks. I've mentioned decks like this in the past. I also kind of think Eldritch is a deck that kind of falls into this category where if you build your deck to beat a specific deck, you literally cannot lose to it. If you build your Purrely deck and you go, I am going to make the most anti-Kashtira or anti-branded Purrely deck literally ever, and just play all your tech slots to beat the specific matchup, you will defeat it literally every time. And once the format is more defined and you can actually have an idea of what decks you will be playing against with some degree of certainty, and then you can adapt your side deck to cover the other matchups much more clearly, I think it will be very strong. But
yeah,
I guess we'll move on to Super Heavy Samurais, next one I have on my list.
Yeah.
So I truly don't have much to say about about these cards at all. I'm not really familiar with what they can do with the cards we have legal, which is, from what I understand, very similar to what they could have done. We don't well, I guess Japan doesn't have Elf anymore either. We don't have Electromite, but we do have Beyond the Pendulum, so there's still a lot you can do, and it's all very similar, but I don't know the specifics of it, and I don't know how we're meant to really approach this deck, especially because from what I've seen now, the most common deck these cards are played in the OCG is an Adamancipator grass deck with block dragon.
Yeah.
And it's
Mhm.
sure, that doesn't
I know,
really
how
translate.
The hell that card even exists in Japan.
Yeah,
so.
But then I look at that and I go well, we can't really adapt this to the TCG because you can play quite literally 3 cards in this 60 card deck here, but it's okay. So
Well,
I'm not sure these are meant to be
You don't have
doing.
the added benefit of being able to take the spells out of your grave, right? With well, you're only playing the 2 copies of Grass and then whatever else, but Like we don't have multiple shufflers and everything, so
Or snow.
it's like a little less. Yeah, well, that's another big one too. It's a little less likely that you'll be able to like splash engines like that. Um, some people discuss like, oh, you play like Spell Striker and then like some other, you know what I mean? Just
That
like
sounds
silly
not
shit
good.
like that. Yeah, pretty
That sounds
much.
really
It's
questionable.
just like any way to offset that
Yeah.
restriction when you probably don't have to.
Mm-hmm. But like, what did they like? I guess the way I see it is
not
I look
inconsistent combo deck.
I look at these combos and I go like, I feel like we could have done all of this already. I feel like if you wanted to make a crazy board, you could have done this with
You could have
38,000 other cards. And I don't really see the appeal of these versus the ones that exist or the ones that are about to come out, whatever. And the restrictions on these seem like a lot. Like you can't play any spells. That's pretty big. I mean, you can, but like not really. Like, and for us, it's much harder to play spells, as you already mentioned. You know, because we lack a lot of the good tools to get the spells out of your graveyard. So it's just like, I don't quite see it to the level that a bunch of other people are discussing it. However, I am prepared to be wrong. But well, that's just how I see it.
This is what I.
Huh? Sorry, you just cut out.
Let you do very unfair things. However, sorry, I said when talking about this with Bohdan is that these cards are very strong and let you do unfair things. Yeah. However, a lot of decks can do that.
Yeah.
And this deck also has the downside of not being able to use spells to.
That's a big one. Yeah, I know that's a great. I think that's the one. Everyone's talking about this, and I go like, I enjoy spell cards. I am a spell card enjoyer.
Those are the cards that let you out the opponent's field the most. So going second, you're going to have a very hard time outside of playing a crap ton of hand traps, right? And not being able to do that is just it puts you in a really weird position.
It
However,
makes no sense for people who want to end on Baron, Appaloosa, like a spell canceller. Like, why do you want to end on these at all?
And you can just already do that. Probably. With like a dragon deck, you know?
Yeah, yes. You're better off playing the dragon deck, in my opinion. Because because you can actually play spell cards and stuff. But
okay, can I just say spell canceller is very funny in this deck because it's just like, oh, if I can't play spells, neither can you. Like, what do you think about that?
But because the deck does. What was that?
I was saying, like, it's so funny that it's playing spell canceller, and it's just like, well, I can't play spells, neither can you. Like, who's playing a bad no spell deck? You.
So, like, like I think this deck has a lot of flaws, but it's still a deck that you 100% can lose to in a tournament just because you lost the die roll, and then like game 3, like you don't draw hand traps or outside their field or whatnot. One other thing I want to point out is that in Japan also, they have like a searchable hand loop as well, where they can rip 2 cards from your hand with Smoke Grenade of the Thief.
Oh yeah, that card's still legal there too.
And you can't do that here. You have to rely on like Gotems to do that.
Gotems.
No, Japan still does Gotems, but.
Japan doesn't have to use Gotems. Japan just.
I know. Yeah, like looking at your opponent's hand and ripping a card is equally as pleasant.
They do Braver Dragon, Power Tool Braver Dragon, right? Is that the one they make?
Did you do that? Power Tool Braver Dragon.
Yeah. That is hilarious. Which, I mean, we have that, but Smoke
literally a generic level 9 synchro. That's also Earth, so all your Verna stuff like lets you get the as the point. Yu-Gi-Oh, Atrocious, etc. But yeah, so back to that point though. Solely, I do not understand why you would like to make a board with like I think these cards are very good. They all do very unique things. It's very interesting, right? Like at the core of it.
But have you considered the cost? That is all I'll say.
Yes. But like they're all very unique, right? Like we look at them and we think, oh, it's interesting. Obviously, the end result is the same, and the steps in between are just a little more convoluted compared to like where you would normally get with these sort of combo decks. There's nothing like truly unique. And I think the resilience mainly comes from like the stuff like Excel Starter Synchro existing now. like your Baron just like is unaffected. Like who would have thought? And then yeah, like make your end board doesn't look anything better than what Dragon can do. Like Dragon just has an order when they can Chaos Angel you and like they clock you, you have to draw a Kaiju. Haha, like that's probably, you know, bad in itself. I think, but like I think other decks are going to be able to do what people are trying to do with Super Heavy now. But I think what you should be doing is why wouldn't you just maximize the opportunity of killing your opponent on turn one, ignore every other variable. If you're so resilient to hand traps, then you're not resilient to Sphere Mode, Lava Golem, you know,
Yeah,
Dark Rule or
yeah.
whatever. Just end the game.
Mhm.
Whether that's like
Yeah,
hand
discard
grip
all
with
6
Gotham,
cards from their
whether that's
hand,
whatever.
or yeah, just FTK
Yeah.
them. Actually, don't give them a
Mhm.
turn. Yeah, I kind of agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I felt
Like
about.
these pseudo FTKs, I
Mm.
feel like they just don't fly currently. Like they're so easy to like just sometimes even beat with engine. Obviously, it's like, oh well, that's just like 4 negates. It's like
I think the
guess.
Pendulum FTK deck was always better than this dumb combo Firewall Pendulum deck. Like that is also one that baffled me when my opponent would like make a board and I would just be like, I feel like the chance of me breaking this is not 0. And even if I only broke that crazy board 20% of the time, that's probably about how often I broke it, I would actually say. Like they won 80% of the time, and then I would go first and I would FTK them. And I would just think, what is happening? You know, like just like that's exactly how I see it with these. Yeah, it's like I don't think your deck changes that much to just discard all 6 cards from your opponent's hand, as opposed to making Baron Appaloosa savage. It just seems like you're doing a lot for not as much benefit. But yeah, so I think we kind of all have very similar thoughts on this deck, I guess. And, you know, maybe we'll all be wrong. Maybe it's just crazy and we're overlooking something, but I don't think so.
No, I don't think.
I think this deck will be playable.
I
I just don't think it'll be nearly as
prospect
good.
of the deck being so strong, sometimes you'll lose to it, but not being consistent to
As
like as one of the other decks, which can do very unfair things with lower amount of investment.
Mhm.
Like, yeah.
I think it comes back to what we've said many a time again when we look at Cyberstorm Access. Is it bringing a new tier 0 deck? Not necessarily. Is it bringing another deck at a similar power level to what we have currently, which inherently makes the game worse? Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on to the Albaz support. I have a bunch of question marks in my notes about this. I feel like this deck has been getting support for 3 years, and I still don't know what they want it to do. And it's
Jeff likes this
been
deck.
good. It's been good sometimes and bad sometimes, and I just don't know what to think of these cards.
It's the same thing with Super Heavy Samurai. It is a good deck that does powerful things, but has flaws that are exploitable.
Mhm.
And it's more of the same. Like there's only so much you can do with a deck that is primarily fusion summons, right?
Yeah. Well, that
I mean,
literally
Mhm.
says you may only fusion summon when you
Yeah.
use your best card. Yeah. So,
well, I said primarily because now you have the new one that's a synchro monster.
yeah,
So,
that's true.
I think that the support that they get. So okay, so I was genuinely surprised like the last wave of support that we got in Photon Hypernova, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's been a minute. I can't remember
I
what set
understand.
even came out. So like I was surprised at how like less one-dimensional those cards made the deck. Like I'm seeing people do again, this is the funny part because they are still doing expulsion and like gimmick puppet, but it's like I'm seeing them do it without even resolving brand infusion.
Yes.
And
yes.
it's just like, yeah, like cool, like you can actually play out your hand now. And it's like quite resilient to like some of the common trends in the format, which is really cool. The downside still being like D barrier is just still easily accessible in the format.
yeah.
And if people are making these crazy end boards, it's like Branded is one of the few decks that can't fit a crazy amount of non-engine. And it's going to be the same now when there's just all these other good branded cards you try and fit into the deck. And then you're either at like this pile strategy or you're at 40 cards where it's like, yeah, you know what? I guess I some of these lists I've seen just like have cut ad libitum, and I'm just like, you know what? It's gotten to that point. Like the value of these cards has just scaled so much where it's like, well, what are we cutting? It's like, I guess we can just cut, you know, branded in red. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
literally becoming like so ridiculous. Where it's like, yeah, we're just cutting all these cards. It's like I have 6 non-engine spots, and like it's still not enough. But I need to fit in all of these new cards. So yeah,
So
branded's just
one
very
thing,
limited.
one thing I want to talk about is like, yeah, all these cards are like pretty good. I think you play almost all of them in your deck. Guiding Clem is a very cool card.
That card's insane.
I really like that card. Uh, but the big issue I have with these cards is that before this set, I would have said I don't think Brandon needs any hits outside of forbidding Branded Expulsion. Now you cannot do that because the new fusion monster is just Branded Expulsion.
Yeah.
And now you cannot just ban Gimmick Puppet because there are other cards you can place instead of Gimmick Puppet, which do the same thing functionally.
Like 1% worse.
Yes. So now that you can't hit any of the cards unless you just ban all of them. So
Yeah.
other than that, then you would just have to go to, oh, I guess I just hit multiple branded cards. So then you're like, what, limit fusion to 1, branded opening or something like
Yeah, like
that.
limit opening, limit fusion, limit
And
looper. Like I don't
yeah,
know.
and,
Like that'll what?
and the deck doesn't have a like win percent that to like warrant doing that, but it still does these extremely frustrating things that it just creates like this weird
I would
like
like to talk
paradox
about
where
that
like
actually.
you can't like you can't hit the cards that you want to hit unless you just ban the new fusion dragon and you ban an expulsion, and then because those are like only going to be used for evil,
Yes,
basically,
that
right?
new branded dragon guy will be used exclusively for evil. So to touch on your point of, like, is their win rate high enough to warrant this? For a very, very long time, I was incredibly numbers based in my philosophy on game design and, what have you. And I would say, well, if it has a low win rate, then it actually isn't a problem. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if they want to put Monster Reborn in their main deck and, have like a subpar card, that's their prerogative. Like, over the course of a long term, it will actually be worse for them than, better for them. And as I've played more and more games, and I've played the, like hundreds of thousands of, I mean, not hundreds of thousands, but, like I've probably played, I think I've played close to 10,000 games of all of these games that I play. Like like I played a lot over many years. And the the philosophy I'm now more open to, after also researching a lot about other games, how they approach design philosophy and whatever. And something in my brief stint in Hearthstone that I really learned a lot from was reading their explanations for balance changes. And there was one that I remember very, very vividly that's kind of stuck with me, where they said this deck didn't have a particularly alarming win rate at most levels of play. However, the way it wins and the amount, or rather the lack of, any counterplay made it so frustrating and just creates an overall negative play experience that why would we want that in the game? Like, let's say there's a deck that has a literal 49% win rate, but they draw their hand and they have a card that wins the game automatically, or they do not. And if you only have 49% of the cards in your deck being that card that automatically wins, that doesn't mean that's a fair thing to have in your game. Well, over the course of the duration of the game, it's actually sub 50%, so it's fine. Not really. That's not, there are more factors that are at play here, and it's like, if the goal of these games is to make people want to play it, right? It needs to be fun. And I think the way that Branded is played right now is some of the least fun I've had playing against a deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! In a long time. I think maybe the only other one that I can think of recently is like when I got Droll Reincarnationed against Trickstar.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
Sure.
probably the time that I don't even have that much issue playing against back row and floodgate decks as much anymore. I think a lot of the decks now are powerful enough and have enough answers that like you actually can get somewhat interactive games sometimes. and then I just play against Brandon. They're just playing a combo deck that floodgates me, and I just go, wow, this is really dumb. Like,
Okay, so before we get too far gone, I want to touch
mhm,
on two things,
mhm,
and one is regarding. I know the point was not Hearthstone exactly, but
yes,
um, with Hearthstone, they have a luxury of being able to say things like that and do things because they can simply edit cards inside of their game.
yes, no, I agree. Yes, yes,
Uh, Unfortunately, Yu-Gi-Oh cannot do that, but Yu-Gi-Oh has done this before, not edit cards, but seeing that like this card is only used for evil, there's no reason to have it exist. With
Mm-hmm.
things like Mass Driver and things like that, right? Um, However, these cards were not specifically only for or were all for like one deck. They were like pretty generic, and so when you have something like branded, it's like, well, what do you what do you do? You literally just have to ban the two cards that like put cards on your opponent's side of the field. That's something else I want to talk about eventually. Maybe not this podcast, but
yeah.
I think
That's
that
a terrible
putting cards
mechanic.
on your opponent's side of the field is something that they should just not do.
I agree.
Um,
I truly hope they never. That is a mechanic that every single time I see a card that does that, like with some very, very, very minor exceptions, I kind of appreciate the necessity of the plunder card that does that because that entire deck
yes.
is based around your opponent having to have a card on their, in their graveyard or whatever. But yes, for the most part, I do agree with you. Those effects are used almost exclusively to make your opponent not be able to play a card,
Yes.
and
Uh,
that's like why.
I would say that like cards that put any card you want on your opponent's side of the field, some that's like fine. But if it's very specific, like except for like Ibli, like I think that card should be banned too.
Yes, I
But
agree.
like yeah, the plunder card, like you just give them like a generic token that doesn't has no effects. Like that's probably where they're at. But they keep making these cards that have like effects and then giving at your opponent any card you want or whatnot, and that's not okay.
I agree. I guess the last thing I'll say about branded is like, yes, I agree. The only way, in my opinion, the only way that they have three things they can do now, in my opinion. They have three options. One, ban all of the in-archetypal cards that put monsters on your opponent's side of the field, which would be Expulsion and the new card, which I don't think they're going to do that. They just made it a secret. That card is not getting banned on the next list. Like, with near 100% certainty, I will say the new secret rare that is not out yet will not be banned on the next list.
Yes.
And then that's option one, which I think is the path of least resistance, actually. I think if
Yes.
they let this go on for one more format, and then maybe we have like a September list, and then they ban that card and Expulsion, I'd be okay with that. Then the brand, because I
am
think the
almost
branded deck
always
is
of
interesting.
the mind that it's better to ban one or two cards and like limit 4 or
Yes,
5.
I agree. So then option two, ban every single degenerate card they could give your opponent. Not feasible because I am 100% certain every single one you can possibly think of, Ito, Gimmick Puppet, Ra's Disciple,
Disciple.
anything you can think of, if they ban them, somebody will find another one. Right?
Or knowing them, they'll accidentally create another one.
Yeah,
So
and then it's just like, and then we're back at square one, right? Where it's like you can't just, that would, in my opinion, that would be like playing whack-a-mole, right? Where like you whack Gimmick Puppet and then Ra's Disciple pops up on the other side and you're like, I guess. And then that's option two, which I don't think is feasible because I don't think they would be thorough enough to make it feasible. Because if they do not ban every single one, it does not matter, right? If they ban Ito and they ban Gimmick Puppet but don't ban Ra's Disciple, then they did nothing, And then the next option, the final option, would be, as you said, just kill the deck, which I don't want them to do. I don't think branded outside of the Gimmick Puppet stuff is particularly oppressive. And in fact, I think it is an interesting deck, and I like the different ways you can build it. And it's a deck that I think is healthy to exist and is just fine. It truly is just the Expulsion, Gimmick Puppet, or Ito or Disciple Floodgate stuff that creates the play patterns that are just not fun. And I would like to see option one or option two and not option three.
I
because
think I think something also like we're talking about like, oh, you think like the branded deck is interesting. I think it is also interesting, and I think it is fun to play with, and
Mhm.
I don't think it's oppressive because it is a deck that every single one of the cards that exist are like interactive or like interaction based, and they're
Yeah.
not just like negate. Negate
Yes.
this,
Yeah.
negate that, negate this, negate that. Almost every single one is like, oh, I'll like pop this card or I'll banish this card.
It's removal
Everything.
instead of negation,
Yeah.
which is less oppressive, I would say.
Yes.
Some decks deal with negation better than dealing with removal, but obviously, I'd say for the most part, negation is harder to deal with than removal. But there are exceptions.
So I feel like the branded deck feels way less bad to play against most of the time because like you're playing cards into their cards, they're playing their cards into your cards.
Mhm.
Um, and then obviously like the deck has like clear weaknesses like Ash Blossom and Dimensional Barrier. Uh, it's definitely not, I think, overly oppressive. But there we go.
Let's keep it moving. We put more on that. Okay, the next couple, let's go a bit quicker. There's also less to talk about, I think, for most of these. So, um, the Visa Starfrost support, and I have specifically the fusion monster, not even what it does, but the utility of allowing you to um, Prisma or fusion deployment out of Visa Starfrost. Probably not fusion deployment, probably
So
just
so
Prisma.
this is like
But
talking about like Mana Dome, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
yeah.
Or like scare, like you can now, because this card exists, you can a hero lives for Prisma, send reveal this guy Vicious Astral Shroud, I think his name is.
Yeah.
Send Visa Starfrost, and now Prisma's name is Visa Starfrost, and now you can turn Prisma into the Scareclaw Link one. And then you can do a lot of stuff from there. And I think we've touched on a lot of this type of thing already with the Super Heavy Samurai deck, but do you think a combo deck based around this interaction has the potential to be stronger than the Super Heavy Samurai, or do you think the utility of these spells
No,
doesn't quite help it enough?
I think the cards you have to play
this
in your deck
this
are
deck's
way worse.
worse.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
this deck like it makes Appaloosa barren, but it's at the cost of playing like
Prisma.
a bunch of Scareclaw cards. Yeah, I think Prisma is probably like the least concerning part. It's like
Yeah,
all the other moving parts are playable. Don't get me wrong. Like
sure.
Visa Starfrost is like an extender to an extent in this deck. You have like your Scareclaw Rykard. You have the field, all of that stuff, right? I
Mhm.
guess the only argument is like the Scareclaw like Reborn is probably like one of the
The
worst
weaker
cards you
ones,
can
yeah.
draw. Yeah. But the issue is like again, you just throw all of these cards into your deck. It loses to your opponent like breathing on you. And you're sort
Yeah.
of just poorly positioned into what every other deck is doing when you go second as well. Because your deck, again, similar to Branded, is okay, not exactly similar to Branded, but it's a lot of like this non like this like engine requirement sort of thing. Like if you're playing like the Mana Dome stuff, or you're just playing like the Starfrost deck with like Prisma and stuff like that. But I think you play the Mana Dome stuff because of like the other synergies. But once you get to that point, again, why wouldn't you just play some type of bestial deck maybe? But I could be wrong. This is like the weird deck that I'm not entirely sold on.
Yeah.
But it just feels like there's more moving parts than I would like, and I feel like it's still weaker to what else is going on in the format. So it's probably
I
something that won't end up being good.
I will say that is what steers me away. I'd say almost every deck that I end up
Mm.
deciding not to play, I think you hit it, is just I look at it and say, I think there's too many moving parts for that I feel
Mm.
comfortable with. And I will say that is definitely like um a lot of the decks that I think I've played, if you look at them, I think are generally just the decks
Oh
that
yeah.
do the
Well,
most with the
the
least is
the
generally
other
how I like
thing
to look at it.
the other thing with spots like that too is like if the new deck now it's like it makes Appaloosa Baron from one card.
So does
And
everything.
it's like no, that's what I so
Yeah.
like maybe okay, not everything, that's sort of
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
generalizing it, but we love doing that
Yeah, yeah.
obviously. But it's
It's
like when
easier
you
to
look at a lot of these
digest,
other
yeah.
decks, if you look at it and you're like, well, I probably could have done this reasonably efficiently in some of like these other decks, right?
Mhm.
Into the exact same format that we're in. It's like, what benefit does this have to the decks that I was playing, and what benefit does the end board of Appaloosa Baron have, right? Like, what is this achieving? And when this does become like a meta deck, like we have Dark Ruler in the format, like, is this better than what Spright was doing? Is this more efficient than what Spright was doing? That's like the other thing I
That's a
sort of
good
like to
point,
ask
actually.
myself.
I'm actually
Yeah,
gonna go
it's just
to.
really weird to think about, because it just seems like all of these decks are trying to do the same thing, but it's like, is this doing what this other deck was doing any better? Is there any like benefits or tricks? That's why I think Super Heavy is the deck that people are sort of like exploring a little bit more of, like, these super heavy cards are like really good. They're cohesive. All of like the really cool machine cards in your extra deck have like these other applications, right? Like, they're not super duper relevant, but it's like maybe you have to Clifford Genius like pop a card. You know what I mean? Just silly shit like that seems like it might be funny and come up. And then you have this one where it's like you make Crush Sheep and summon back a guy. It's like, that's interesting. Sounds great.
Yeah, that's a good point though. That I truly think Spright might just actually be the best of the decks that do this. And by do this, I mean just make a wide board. And I think it's like,
Yeah.
it's funny, people don't without Elf, so like there's no access to like the double toad. I think people really just like neglect that Spright really can just go like right, get Griffin, like get level 2s on the field, make Sprint, send Angler, and just go like gigantic for blue for Jet for like red, and like make like the rank 2 that negates, and that's just like 3 negates, off of like nothing. And I don't know, those cards still just do a lot. Like, obviously without Elf they're way less resilient, but they still just can negate 3 of your cards for free, more or less. And yeah, it does just seem like those cards have more utility, or just a little bit better individually than a lot of these weird combo decks that
even
play a lot of bad
without
cards.
like the toad deck, right? It's
Yeah.
just like, if you do the absolute base level for something
Like
like
summon
Spright,
blue is like 2 negates
yeah,
technically, you know? Yeah.
pretty much it's like you factor in like you have the sprint balance, you have like this, you have that,
Hmm.
whether it be smashes, double cross, carrot, red, right? It's still a lot of cards, and like again, like Jeff loves to say, it's just like same game engine, different skin,
Yep.
right? Just all the same sort of shit coming together. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's like these do different things, but only in like the surface level, like super heavy, like all the other stuff. It's just a really, really weird like point of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, where we come from tier and then we just like low point it again, like Nat's season last year, of everything being like same power level, if not similar, equally oppressive sort of things, whether it be Mystic Mind Rivalry as like the floodgates of the format, or you have your combo decks with like Scythe that didn't really do anything because Scythe was like garbage, who would have thought? Yeah, I don't know. It it's just it's difficult to discuss like new decks coming out when I'm so jaded with just like the
I
limited
agree.
playtesting
We've
that I've
we've
had.
and we've played so many decks over so many years that
Yeah,
it all just blends together. I do kind of agree that it's like, it's
yeah.
doing this again, huh?
Because it's
It's
like,
like,
until I'm playing the actual tournament experience,
yeah.
I can't really give a definitive answer. Because it's like, in testing, a lot of the time you'll look at a deck and be like, I don't understand why this is like, people think this is good, and you'll just see other people have success with it. You'll still be baffled by it, but then a lot of
Yeah.
the time, like when you play a tournament versus when you test in like the specific circle of people that you test with, where it's like, well, we're making sure everything is going the correct way. But then like you play a tournament, it's like you can't give your opponent a crazy amount of credit, right? Like,
Yeah.
not to say that they're bad, but it's like they're not the people that you were testing with, where you're playing open-handed or taking back moves or like learning on the fly. And
Mhm.
it's just like, well, if we both play correctly, I don't think this deck can ever win. But like, no one's ever truly playing correctly in a tournament setting. So you have to get that sort of feedback, and then you have to have the feedback of like, can this deck play, the full 45-minute rounds with like a win condition or something? We look at like Runick and stuff like that, and there's just like levels to it. It's very hard, like surface, point to look at it. If we look at the only results we have to base it off of like Japanese results with Cyberstorm Axis, different format entirely.
Yes.
And then the 10 case tournament, right? Like that's
Mhm.
like all we really had to gauge it. And like obviously Kashtira still ran rampant through the 10 case tournament. and we don't know if that's because people are either not prepared for Cyberstorm access, and they're like where we're at, where it's like, oh well, if there's no ban list, then who gives a shit? Like he's still gonna have to play through a Rise Heart. It's like, well, what are we doing? We're putting Kaijus in our deck for Noir and a Rise Heart, right? Or like the zone locking combo is like, we may as well have Kurakara somewhere in our list. You know, it'll deal with this and that, and it just doesn't feel like you're gaining anything. You're just adding more stuff to the mix. That's just not as fun. But
Yeah.
Jeff, stop talking. He's probably
Let's
just
move
like,
on to the
oh
next
god, I
one.
hope they talk
Yeah.
about the ban list.
Yeah, I know.
I stop talking, and I'm also I have a new kitten, and he's attacking my feet, and I'm trying not to scream into the mic.
Understandable. All right, so this is actually the card that I was most excited for originally, and then just how things developed, I just don't care anymore. And that's like the
I'm
dragon
gonna
of the
tinker over
100
everything
apples.
on this list for you, Ryan.
Okay.
You can guide them in, and I will tell you
Yeah.
if it's good or bad.
Right.
All right. Now
So
say
the
card
Apple
name.
Dragon thing without Elf and without
All right.
Chaos Ruler seems a lot worse.
Literally unplayable.
Yeah.
So the
Okay,
issue is
do not say that. That card is still very good.
Yeah.
I think that card
There's
is
no way
good,
you
but I
can read
don't
that
think it's
card
doing
and say
anything
this
now.
card is unplayable.
Nah, like unplayable is relative to like the format. I don't think it's gonna be a played
Anytime
card
they
in the
make good
format.
synchro monsters, this card is going to come up in the future.
How about
No,
the
of
how about the bug
course.
guy from Dabble?
Uh,
Huh?
Yeah,
well, has that been played?
Well, what do you mean has it been played? What do you mean?
Has it? Wait, which bug guy are we talking
The
about?
bug level 8 synchro that sends
That's not from Dabble.
what's it from?
I'm pretty sure it's from Photon, right?
I don't know. Regardless.
Okay.
Regardless. What about that guy?
Anyway, Chaos Ruler Insect guy.
Yeah, him. He could be good.
Still probably
Hey, what if they unban
yeah.
Glow Up Bulb like they did in Japan? Huh? Then that guy sends Glow Up Bulb.
Hey, we're supposed to have a ban list talk, and we're never gonna get to it.
I know.
About these
All right, so
okay,
I think this card is good,
I'm
but I don't think it's as
I'm gonna tell you
obviously
my
good.
hot picks of the format really quick, because Apple Dragon is not one of them currently.
Sure.
I think the Chaos Angel is pretty good. I think Chaos Angel is just a good card in general, and I think people are gonna see that because that's gonna be the front runner of the set from what pre-sales look like.
I think that
the
card is
Bestial
going to end up as the like the generic synchro. What's the card that ends up
like
what was the
like
ultra
Savage Dragon,
Savage
access
Dragon,
code.
yes.
Yeah,
like
sure.
yeah. So
yeah,
Savage
I think that card's
$40
really
$15
good.
Ultra.
Works in everything. It's perfect. The Bestial Dispatto, I think again, similar to Chaos Angel, you will see a deck where this card will shine. Again, I don't think it's like a crazy card, but I think it's like just really good, right?
And you play this card in Dragon Link, and it's
pretty good. Like I think well, like you play Chaos Angel and you play the Bestial card, right? It's the same thing. Yeah, I think that card is good. And then I think the cyber support, oh yeah, like the firewall defensor and stuff like that. I mean, those cards are just like the same as all the other stuff. I think there's another funny thing that I wanted to bring up. So I was messing around with like Cyberse because Japan's using that as like their playback into like what the format is for them, which is just like Purrely and like the super heavy whatever. So it's like, yeah, you can probably just kill them with like update access, and you have like all these other cool things. But then you link the link decoder, which just like gives them additional bodies just by making like a link 1. And then like just like summoning about it just seems silly, and I think that one facilitates a lot more than what like maybe current can do, because like obviously we don't have the luxury of like a really broken link 1. Like everything just has to be like multiple card combinations, and it deck's still good. I don't know if the new cards really give it any more benefit, and that's sort of what we're seeing in Japan as well, where it's like they're not going super wide combo. It's just like these are Mathmech cards. I think the new Spirit card, I think that card's really interesting. I don't know if it's like broken, but just having like that whole one card, rank 4 seems really interesting.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about the Spirit that was the sneak preview card. I'm like, that card is unplayable. I don't know what you're talking about.
No.
Okay, yes, yeah. The Spirit that's for generic rank 4s.
Yeah,
That card is very good.
Sakaitama, or whatever it is.
Sakatama.
Yeah,
something like that. I was looking through bulk and I found Aratama.
Yeah.
And the other, Aratama is the good one. Yeah. Yeah. So like that's gonna be like a nice engine that people are just gonna like load up in decks that make 4s. Like it's just gonna be like make your Mathmech anything, add circular and like cool, like play,
Make
Cyber locks.
Gallant Granite, search Zephyrath. You know how I get.
Yes.
But it's okay. Okay, so I think that's more or less CYAC roundup.
That's enough.
That was good. That was a good.
Action.
I agree. That was good. I
Yeah.
appreciate you just hammering those last ones out. Okay, so ban list predictions and wish list separately. I think we're gonna talk a little bit about what we want to happen and then a little bit about what we think will actually happen. So as far as like, let's do the first like category of like, let's look at the decks that exist currently and that we maybe think shouldn't exist any further. And I think the big one is Kashtira, right? And how do you think that deck should get hit? And what do you think they'll actually end up doing? I guess first, let's just look at what Japan already did, which was limit Fenrir, limit Unicorn, limit Field Spell.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it, he says. As he, I don't think they limited Theosis or anything.
No,
I think it was just that. Obviously, that's a lot. That's, but yeah. Do you think that is the approach that needs to be taken, or do you think a different approach should be taken or could be taken?
Nah, that's too heavy-handed. I think we're all of the opinion of that Unicorn is the strongest card of the deck, and that card will probably get limited to 1. When it comes to cards like Fenrir, so it's weird because Fenrir is like a pretty strong card, but I think the fact that it's generic is what makes people think, oh, this card will get limited. But I think that is kind of a reason not to limit it. I think it's great to have cards like that for other deck. I think it makes other decks more interesting. Like when you summon Fenrir alone, I feel like it's never a card where you're like, holy crap, they summoned Fenrir.
Yeah, if my opponent's playing not Kashtira and they like summon Fenrir, I'm not like screaming. I'm just like, that's pretty good.
Even if they are playing Kashtira.
Oh yeah, actually yes. Yeah, you're right. I think if they're playing Kashtira and they lead Fenrir, I go, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God it was Fenrir and not Unicorn. Yeah, you're right.
So I don't think I would go down that line. I don't think they're going to hit the field spell. It's a secret rare. I think also when we look at the tier deck, which is also secret rare, they let you have the field spell, but like limited all the other guys.
Hey, I have a wild idea that might actually be the solve. What if they just ban Big Bang?
What?
What if they just ban Kashtira Big Bang?
So then you still always end on a Rise Heart?
Yeah,
a lot?
but that's if people are saying like they're gonna ban Diablosis and then consistency hits, it's just like, what if you just ban Big Bang entirely and that you just can't zone lock, like can't do anything. And that would be the solve, right? Because it's just it's a common in a core set and no one's gonna be upset. But I think that's like too next level. Like I don't think anyone would even fathom that. Like that would just be like my
yeah. I also
you know
don't
what I mean?
think
Like
anybody
I'm
would
sitting
fathom
here
that.
thinking, I'm like, I guess. Like,
so I think that if they, I would agree with you that if they weren't allowed to like hit Diablosis,
which I think is like a silly rule, but like, well, not even like a rule. It's just something people have made up, right? It's just like, oh, you can't ban a prize
card. You can't. That is like a.
Well, you never know. You never know when you go to Japan and you say, "Hey, we want to hit this card," and they're like, "No."
Yeah, you truly don't know.
Is Diablosis a V jump or like a W jump or like a value book or what?
I think it's a valuable book. Let me check.
Okay.
I'm actually
because so apparently that was like an issue, but now we have separate ban lists where I don't think it matters because that was an issue with Shockmaster, right? That was like the funny thing. It was like Shockmaster was a value book promo in Japan, and the lore behind it back in like the early-ish 2010s was them saying, yeah, they can't ban Shockmaster in Japan. And the reason is because the value book never goes out of print. You can always go and just like buy a copy of it. So like they can't ban a card in circulation.
Diablosis was just in their equivalent of Battles of Legend. It was just in a pack. I don't know why. I thought for sure this was a jump promo. That's so bizarre. They just removed this. This was supposed to be in our Battles of Legend Light's Revenge.
Mhm.
And they just took it out and made it a prize card. That's really weird. I didn't know that. I thought for sure it was a promo.
Interesting.
That is super weird. But anyway, I mean,
Okay.
that's not the first time they've done, like, Baguska was supposed to be in the first Battles of Legend, and they just made it a Sibber import randomly. So I don't know. Like, obviously there's some weird stuff going on with how these cards get distributed. That's just bizarre to me. I didn't know that. I thought for sure it was a jump promo or a viable.
Yeah,
promo.
I mean, at that point, I'd feel a lot more confident about them just banning.
There's nothing.
Entirely, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a number monster. Oh God.
Yeah, it is a number monster. Okay.
Yeah,
so
how many of those are banned?
I think so. So when Ryan goes back and makes a little graphic of this, I think the way that Kashtira would, I do like the idea of just getting rid of Big Bang. Something else we talked about was we've saw that. Okay, cat, that's enough. Ow, ow, ow. uh, uh, with when we saw with Tearlament how they banned a key card that made the deck work and how it works with other cards, and that was with the fusion Kit Kalos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ryan and I talked about before where you just ban Kashtira, rank 7 guy.
Shang.
Yeah,
Shangri-La.
Shangri-La.
Yeah.
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 And then because it gets rid of the zone locking thing, you can still summon your Arise Heart,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have to worry about Diablosis. You don't have to worry about any of that other stuff. You just get rid of the thing that does the degenerate thing of zone locking, and
Yeah.
and that's that. Also, it's like it's a super rare. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I think again that is like a next level thing that I don't think that they will do. I think
I
Big Bang has a bigger chance of getting hit than like Shangri-La.
Really?
I think Shang is a very weird one in that, like, you can still summon like Rukalos, right? Like, so obviously using it as like an argument is like kind of fruitless because you can still summon a Rise Heart, like, hard ways, but
Which you do
it
every
seems
time
like,
anyway.
yeah, no,
Like,
exactly,
every
right?
time.
Yeah. No, so like I think they might just not even consider hitting Shang, just given how like Japan has panned out. I think the consistency here would make a little bit more sense, TCG side, before they start hitting stuff like Shang. And like they'll just try and keep it in the format, and it'll just be another, like, average control
So
deck.
I think hitting the consistency of this deck makes it much worse. I think if they ban Shang and keep all the cards at 3, it is a better deck than if they limit Fenrir
No,
and
I
Unicorn.
agree.
And like I just
I think cards like Fenrir in a deck like this, where like it can be utilized, I think that's like very, very like strong. When Fenrir is searching Fenrir, nothing matters. You know what I mean? Like no one's like, oh no, he's such Fenrir. But like when Fenrir is searching Tearlament, Kashtira,
Kashtira,
like
yeah.
then I have a point of concern. And like obviously in like
Really?
the
Because
mono Kashtira deck.
I'm never thinking, oh man, they searched.
I think he means in the context of an actual Tearlament deck. Like if that would
No,
be
like,
how
well,
it's
no,
utilized,
like, so just
then
like
you're
searching a card, them searching Fenrir, it shouldn't make a difference. Like, I that's why I agree. I'm like, Fenrir
Yeah.
should probably be at 3, but I think when Fenrir is like functioning as like a way to get to another like extender or something else, right? Like when Fenrir is like multifaceted, then it becomes really, really awkward, because then I think that card is stupid. If Fenrir is literally just existing to search another copy of itself, it's just Stratos at that point. It's Stratos with like 2400 and it banishes a card. Like, I'm okay with that. I think that's like the natural power creep. Like,
I unfortunately
of
think that
Yu-Gi-Oh!
we're in the minority. So I'm gonna explain my bias as to why I don't want Fenrir limited. I've said this before, but as long as we're on the topic, I'll just say it again. I really want to play Vanquish Soul when it comes out, and the biggest problem with Vanquish Soul as it stands in the TCG is we do not have Maxi, so we lack a reasonable Earth monster to reveal for the effects. Fenrir would fill that spot perfectly because it's a reasonable card you can play in your deck. You just summon it, and it searches a Fenrir, and now that is the Earth monster you are revealing for your Vanquish Soul cards. And I think that card fits that deck so perfectly, and I really want to play that deck. So I'm just going to show my bias of that is why I don't want Fenrir limited, because I think if Fenrir is limited, I think that deck literally seems borderline unplayable. But
So
we'll see.
on that subject,
Yeah.
something you can also do is when I was trying to mess with that deck,
Mhm.
is that you can also use a single copy of Rise Heart because it is fire, and then you can use that to reveal as a fire
Yeah,
monster,
sure.
or you
Yeah.
can use it as an Xyz play.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, very, yeah. Like I think, and then if Fenrir is limited, I think even using that Rise Heart is much less relevant, because then what are you going to do?
Well, yeah,
Like,
you just
yeah,
wouldn't do it.
yeah, you just wouldn't do it. Yeah, so I think, yeah, like a small engine of 3 Fenrir and 1 Rise Heart in the Vanquish Soul deck is like cool, and I think that deck is cool, and I want to be able to play it. So I'm gonna hope Fenrir doesn't. And yes, and I do agree with everything you said. I think Fenrir is the least offensive card in this deck. I do not think, especially because we've all agreed in the actual Kashtira deck, Fenrir is not the best card. Like when your only starter is Fenrir, it's not even. Yeah, it's like summoning Fenrir in the Kashtira deck does not do anything, actually. Like on its, it makes Shangri-Ira and passes. Like it doesn't do anything. Like Fenrir in the Kashtira deck is not even the focal point. It really is Unicorn and Birth are the crazy cards in the Kashtira deck. And like if you limit Unicorn and limit Birth and maybe limit Field Spell, again, we've said maybe they don't do that, but it's like, which not limiting the Field Spell makes me feel like Fenrir's gonna get limited, because and maybe the stars align, and I get to play Field Spell and Fenrir in my Vanquish Soul deck.
Happens to Fenrir, I think that they semi-limit it.
I would be okay with that. I think that would also be. I think that would also be a fine. That's interesting. Yeah.
That splash it ends up being like malicious, where like you just Fenrir search Fenrir, and then you do it the one thing, right?
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I could definitely get behind that. I would even say maybe that's like fine. Like that might actually be like a very reasonable one if it's like limit Unicorn, semi-limit Fenrir. And I agree that like I usually don't like cards getting semi-limited, but when a card can interact with itself, then absolutely semi-limiting is like a relevant thing, right? So yeah, I can definitely get behind that. I don't think that's that bad. I think that's fine. And is like a reasonable thing to do, and would make Vanquish Soul playable still, because it still fills that function of you can summon Fenrir and search a Fenrir and not be sad. Please let me play Vanquish Soul. I'm begging you, please. I'm just gonna scream it into the void. Like, please let me play this deck. Yeah, I could definitely see that. But I think my personal like wish list, I guess, of what I would ideally want happening would be Shangri-Ira getting forbidden and probably no other hits. Just because then to go back to something I mentioned way earlier of the guessing game of, okay, how do you play around these? Then the Kashtira deck is making a Rise pass or 2 Arises, and then the Purrely deck is making Noir, and then there are cards that actually overlap against that, and you're not just getting zone locked, and you can actually make a deck that can cover these things.
What if, as well, on the note of literally everything, what if we ban Rise Heart?
Right, like the level 4 guy? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I'm fucking with you. I mean, like, that could be an option.
Yeah, that could be an option too.
I think the actual hits that have to happen.
Well, if you're banning Rise Heart, it's because you're banishing Big Bang, and at that point, you just be banning Big Bang.
Well, it's more for the fact that Rise Heart is like enabling the first proc of
yeah, it's enabling the first trigger of Shangri-Ira.
But like no, it's all the same thing. Like in some respects, I think like in the grand scheme of things, the body from Big Bang is mattering more than the banish.
100% matters.
Yeah.
Like you don't
care.
No,
I agree. No, I'm just saying more from like if you try and like dig deep and find something that isn't there, I'm sure you could make an argument for banning. Multiple of the like
banning
the cards,
Rise.
Right?
Banning Rise also makes Unicorn no longer a 1 card 3 material 7, right? It shouldn't be.
You can't. No, you can Scareclaw banish Theosis and do it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can. Okay, sure, that's fair. Yeah. And then you're yeah, it's about the same.
I think the only way to actually just like make this deck not a powerhouse, well, not like a powerhouse in the format, but like a functional deck in the format, is to, just ban Arise Hot and just be done with it, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just the solution.
That is the other option.
But yeah, I
You mean,
don't think we really want to talk
you mean
about
you just mean to
Kashtira
make the
all
deck
that much.
unplayable?
No, like, well, technically yes, but I don't think Arise
No,
Hot
not
should
technically.
exist.
That's just what it is. The deck
No,
becomes
yeah,
unplayable without that card.
yeah, sure. I don't think a Rise Hot should exist. So yeah, make the deck unplayable. I don't give a shit. All right, next one. What else do we think?
Yeah, Spright.
So the next, I'd rather. I mean, we can talk about Spright, but I think there's only. I think it's very simple for me. I think they're probably just going to hit one card and hit starter to one. If they really want to do anything else, they can maybe. I would not hit blue. I'd probably hit Jet. But I think it's just going to be Spright starter to one, honestly.
Yeah, or gigantic band maybe.
Mm,
But probably
Probably not.
Probably starter to one, jet to one. That's what Japan did, I think.
There's some like other silly ones that I like contemplated, but they don't make too much sense. It was like shit like Nimble Beaver to one, right? Like just silly stuff like that actually don't even seem terrible.
Yeah, like or Nimble Beaver to two even would like make it a lot more difficult.
Yeah,
honestly.
like potentially,
yeah,
right?
That's very funny. That's funny.
Yeah, just like the little things like that will definitely like lay it to it. I don't think Spright needs a hit.
Instead of doing Nimble Beaver, couldn't they just go ban Nimble Inkler?
Yeah, that also is an option.
I guess it doesn't make it like a different, like you're just making the deck worse, and it's like if it's still an ignorant thing, then yeah, you should probably be banning like Angler at that point. I think once you get to the point where you think you're gonna ban like Angler, you probably should just be looking at banning Sprint entirely.
Yeah,
but
that's something that we think
a
might
different
happen
topic
one day anyway.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think
exactly.
Sprint is
That's what I mean. Like that's a different topic of discussion. I think I don't think Spright has to be hit currently. I don't think there's anything crazy. I think Double Cross is a card that might actually be like a little problematic in theory, but I don't think we're at that point yet where that needs to be discussed. I think that card is like a very silly card, but not like it's never like the craziest card every time, but it does seem like a ridiculous card when you read it, right?
Yeah.
Like as a searchable, it's just very off-putting.
Sorry? I don't agree actually. I think that card is good among sprites, and like that's really it. You can't really like. Well, I think when it comes to Spright being really good, I think of it as being really easily splashed.
It's never like
and
that
the reason why
card
it's really easily
specifically, yeah.
splashed is because of all the other cards, not because of that.
No, I agree. It just seems like such an outlandish card. Like I'm hitting all the weird stuff in this discussion, but I don't think that's a card that
Let's
has
ban
to be banned,
Gamma Burst. Like,
yes.
All right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I honestly think that card does not need to exist.
Oh my god.
It is literally the stupidest card. The amount of times that you are just losing to your opponent going like Gifter, summon guys, summon blue, Gamma Burst, and you're just dead. And that does, it can and will, it happen during tier format, it happens every time. That card only exists to cheese wins. Literally nothing else.
I agree.
But
yeah, it's limited removal.
I don't think it has to be banned. I just don't think there is any reason for it to exist. Because no one is literally looking at Gamma Burst and saying, yeah, you know what, I guess I can use it to buff my guy to attack over like this thing. No, it's always just like I'm going to use this to like facilitate some absurd OTK that should never come up, and I'm only winning because I have Gamma Burst in my deck, and my deck is worse, right? Like when Spright was good, it did not have to play Gamma Burst. Now Spright is bad, it has to play Gamma Burst. Anyway. Yeah, Spright is fine. Doesn't need to be hit. Anything that should happen is just going to be like gigantic, but I don't even think that should be a thing. I think gigantic is just a really interesting card. The restriction on it is fine. I think it's always the ignorant stuff, right? Like maybe ban Ibley, and that's your argument against like Spright, right?
Sure, yeah, I can get behind that.
Yeah, like that could be fine. I think Ibley is the silly card, but also keeps some stuff in check. I don't know how to feel about it. I'll let Konami deal with that one. I can't give an opinion on that. I don't think.
So we kind of already talked about branded, like actually just completely.
Yeah.
So let's skip ahead to Labyrinth.
I think Mathmech is like the second most played deck in Dueling Book.
Oh well, no, I just for Labyrinth, I just want to say I don't think that needs to get hit.
Yeah, but what is the top rated deck on Dueling Book, huh?
I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Labyrinth is
Turbo.
Not very
anyway.
Good. I don't think Labyrinth is a problem. I don't think it needs to be hit at all. Actually.
Okay. So if Labyrinth ever becomes a problem, it is not Labyrinth itself. I think
Correct.
No,
Labyrinth is
Yeah.
fine.
it's stuff like Ghost and Imagine and Rivalry and all
Yeah.
that crap.
Well, yeah, like I think like you would
Skill
just
Drain.
evaluate stuff as it comes, right? It's like, oh, these floodgates are like the problem, sure. It's like, oh, this card is getting cheated out, D-Barrier, Eradicator Virus, right? Like those are the silly cards
Yeah.
that are just becoming, you know what I mean? Like, what did we hit in Flunderies? Did we hit consistency cards in Flunderies? No, we banned the stupid card. Is Flunderies still a playable deck? Not really, but like it's a deck you can play, and it's not, gonna
Like
do
that
anything
deck is still
different.
topping regionals. So
No,
I mean,
it multiple one top four the 250th in LA, and then like two
Yeah.
others top the 250th in LA, and like three or one or two top the one in London. So like the deck is still fine. And I think that's like the thing you want to do with Labyrinth. You don't want to hit any of the Labyrinth cards because they're very, very fair. Some of them look really ignorant, but these combos or like these setups would not happen without the ignorant cards. Looping D barrier is not happening, if D barrier doesn't exist. So
Yeah, sure.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The Labyrinth cards
do you
are
want to talk
not
about
the issue.
Mathmech? Mathmech is like the easy one.
Well, clearly I don't want to, but we may. we can.
I think Cyber's decks in general are very silly right now, because of just like how easy it is, just like not cheese out a win, because it's just what the deck is actually supposed to be doing. Is just like update into access, right? And that's just been what the deck can do for the longest time. Like Salamangreat does the same thing. I think update jam, it doesn't have to exist. Which is interesting. I don't think you should be hitting access code. I think access code is fine, right?
So so a long time ago when Borrelsword first came out, I thought to myself, I think this card could be banned one day. You could just attack for game out of nowhere, and then they made a better Borrelsword, and I thought the same thing. I said this card could just be banned one day. I think. But I do think it's on the fairer side of cards. Like when we think about cards being banned, I don't think this is like at the top of the list. But I do think there's a world one day where like this card ends up being banned because it's so easy to pump out a 5,000 attack monster that destroys everything. And like even if we do, so I think that Update Jammer should be banned. This card, in tandem with Access Code Talker, has the highest win rate out of any card played on Dueling Book. Every card in the game with more than 1,000 games played. That with 72%, around 70% of the time you summon access code with Update Jammer, you're winning the game. That is extremely high and extremely worrying. If anything that goes, so when you look at, for me personally, once you see that win percents of cards or decks are in the 60s, that is when you want to start looking at, okay, maybe we should be doing something here. Update Jammer and access code are like 70%. That is like a pretty big deal. That is not something you want to ignore. Which I think that, but I think that they might, because I don't think it's something that's like talked about enough. I agree that Update Jammer should be banned, and I think that if you look at any other cards, I think Circular should go to 1. That card is just way too easily used. It generates so much. And it just lets you do stuff not even in just cyber decks. So we were talking about this before, where you can splash this card into other decks, right?
Which like no one is doing. And the only instance I found really of somebody doing it is somebody topped like a Latin American remote YCS with Crystal Beast, and I looked at their deck and there was just one circular in it, and I was like, what is happening? And he just used the Crystal Beast engine to make a rank 4, and it made the Mathmech rank 4 that searches circular, and then circular sends the guy, one of the guys that summoned back, and then it searches the reborn spell, and it just does like update jammer and just kills you or something. And I'm like, what is happening? Or not update jammer. It does maybe it was update jammer. It was just making like a link 4 and just killing his opponent. And I'm like, what is going on? Like sure. And the only restriction circular has is it says you can only attack with 1 monster for the rest of this turn. So if update jammer is banned, you can never, with an asterisk, do 8,000 off 1 attack. So with Update Jammer getting banned, you could argue Mathmech doesn't become playable anymore, but
attack,
whatever.
But it's technically 1 card. Most of the circular is just like 1 card access code update jammer, right?
Yeah, which I'm saying that update jammer bypasses the only restriction circular has.
Yeah.
So if update jammer is gone, then circular actually has a restriction and it becomes a much more fair card. So I might even argue circular doesn't need to get hit if update jammer gets hit, because then it can't ever actually kill your opponent, which is relevant, I guess. But we'll see how that plays out, I guess. But yeah, I agree with you. It's like not many people are really discussing it. Like I don't think a lot of people really realize just how generic circular can be, especially maybe in tandem with the cards that Bohdan was talking about from CYAC with the new spirits that can just like make a rank 4. It's like you just make a rank 4, search circular, summon circular, like just do whatever, right? And like you're probably gonna kill your opponent. Seems good. And I'm pretty sure that actually works with the transcode restriction because the spirits are additional normal summons.
Yes.
So transcode, which I believe says you may only special summon Cybursts the turn you use it. So the spirits getting extra normal summons shouldn't conflict. If I remember correctly, what all these cards say, it shouldn't conflict with that. So you can probably just do that and just transcode update jammer access code and just make it the easiest game of your life, probably. So we'll see how all this plays out if nothing gets hit. But yeah, definitely something to be concerned about. Something on your radar at least.
I still think you do need to like have access to a kaiju enough of the time, right? Like given how the format is panning out, it's like
Sure.
Yes, going first, like uncontested, you can, cure world hunger, right? Like who cares? Going second, I think you are playing into boards with like negate, suppressive boards, arise hearts, noirs, all of that bullshit. So like the fact that you should know, you can bypass the transcode restriction is good, but sometimes you will have to
kaiju anyway.
Special a Santa Claus, and it's like, well, now you have to have an extra body. It's like, I guess so. Yeah. But yeah, that would be solved. Extra body. Let's just get rid of update entirely. Done.
Yes.
Okay.
So after that, I think the Runick / maybe Naturia cards, more so the Runick cards.
Yeah. Especially because Dual Nexus, they're getting a really, really good Runick fusion, if I remember correctly.
I think that card is very strong.
That card is incredible. Like I read that card and got mad at how good I thought it was. But yeah, so yeah, I could definitely see Runick getting a bit. I don't think Runick needs to be like destroyed. I don't think Runick is like so super crazy that like you can't fight back. But I definitely think some light hits could be. I think like limiting Fountain could be something to look at. I think having the recursion of Fountain is a lot.
I think they're okay. Obviously, the issue is like it'll still exist. It's just gonna be watered down, and it's like how many times are you using it for more than just like genning a fusion, right? Like everything is turning into Fountain anyway. Does the additional copy of Fountain matter that much? Like it will, but I don't know if it's ever enough. And it's like I don't know if Runick is truly good enough to hit, which is like crazy for me to think. Like I don't think you should be hitting for higher, or you should be hitting Naturia. Like obviously, I think Naturia Beast is a silly card.
I think you can ban that Beast.
Oh no,
I don't think that should exist.
When you're talking to Naturia cards, I think Naturia Beast should be banned.
Yeah, I think Naturia Beast shouldn't have existed from the get-go.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, yes, I agree. That card is ridiculous.
But yeah. But yeah, like when we get to like Runick itself and you look at like it doing well, I think Runick is just like really well designed in the grand scheme of things. Like I think Fountain is silly, but I think the Runick cards themselves are just great. MST that does another thing when you don't need it to be MST has to be my favorite, just everything. Right? So maybe Fountain Hit is just the appropriate course of action. I think Tip Hit and Fountain Hit are like the safe bets, right? Like if they're gonna do anything, it's gonna be something like that.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. I don't think I would see both of them go to one. I think it's probably
but it would be
one or the other.
Yeah.
I think they would just end up going for Tip, honestly, because it's just like the easiest one. It's like this card is all of them.
Yeah, I think Tip giving you the extra shuffle back as well is like the other issue, right? Because like Tip is always generating itself plus another Runick card. Yeah.
Tip will like almost always let you say, all right, I'm drawing 3 cards this turn. Whereas
Uh-huh.
without it now, you're probably drawing one or
Yeah.
two. But yeah,
I honestly don't think it has to be hit now. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't hit it, but you know, if they do hit it, I would sway towards fountain and tip, and I think those are that's like the logical course of action.
Yeah.
Could also see an argument for them banning Hugin entirely, right? That like later
Sure,
down the line,
sure.
if they do think this to be an issue, because then you have to hard draw the fountain, and then we'll see like these more like raw dedicated runic decks, and it's like you don't get the luxury of like a free level 2 like runic sprite and shambles. Yeah, soon only runic generator will be the best deck, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that more or less covers the decks that like currently exist that I think like need to be addressed, or like need to be discussed. Am I
Other than
missing
that, I
something?
think there are just individual cards I think we should talk
Sure.
about.
Yeah. Like what individuals? Which ones do you have in mind?
Um, the first one. So when I thought about Naturia Beast, the first one that came to mind is Cyberstein. That
Sure.
card should probably just be banned again. There's just no
Yeah.
that card does nothing except for cause problems. It's just one of those things that we talk like it's like Mass Driver. What is this card used for? Only evil
Only
and nothing
evil.
else.
Yeah.
I
For
think
the history of the
it's
whole
funny
game.
as well that all of these super heavy samurai decks, when they're not FTKing you, they're trying to Cyberstein into exterior. Or now they're trying to spell cancel it because they realize, well, this doesn't beat Dark Roller. And it's just like these whole like layers to it where you just think, damn, why the fuck are any of these cards legal
I know.
now? Like
Yeah.
all it's doing is just, you know what I mean? Like
Exactly. Yeah.
like, oh, we should ban exterior. It's like, well, some idiot's just gonna come up with some other FTK with like Stein, and it's just not gonna be good. But like now you have to worry about Stein for like 10 minutes, or like Stein inter-element format. People make this like. I still see people talk about it now in like Monster Duels. Like, I think Cyberstein is like pretty broken. It's just instant fusion, but it's I'm like, just shut up. You know what I mean? Like, just silly stuff like that, where it's like you're using it to summon kick killers. Like, I don't care, but like Stein shouldn't exist, and neither should kick killers. Let's just not talk about it. Easy. One of them doesn't exist, so
And maybe soon
Yeah.
both of them won't. Ha.
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Other than Cyberstein, another one that I think we talked about this the other day in chat that I think that it definitely will not now, but I think eventually Baron has to go.
Oh, yeah. I think that's a card, especially because they're printing. This set had like 3 level 10 synchros that are like good.
It has like some good
Yeah.
level 10 stickers, yes.
Yeah, and I'm like, these are good, but why would I ever make these when Baron exists? Like for the most part, right? Like not exclusively.
The Excel is a weird card now with Baron legal because I feel like that just adds another layer to it where it's like Baron probably shouldn't exist. But like Excel making any of the other 10s is probably pretty reasonable. Like
Yeah.
nothing
And it's true.
seems
The fact
ridiculously
that Baron
oppressive.
gets a negate, a pop, and also can turn into any monster in your graveyard, which is extremely
Yeah.
underrated, and it can just turn into like something super oppressive or like just super toxic, is like that is like all three of those things together. They didn't need to be printed on the same card.
I
So I
agree with you
definitely
completely. Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
has too many. I think it just has too many effects that are all like good. It has too many effects that are all good.
It's too many effects that are too good on a too generic of a card.
Yes, very,
Yeah.
very much so. I'm
People
inclined to
neglect the one where it just turns into anything engrave, and it's like it's just very funny to think about. Like that was a big focal point. Japan was doing like, I'm gonna make double Baron, one's gonna tag out for Scythe after I Beatrice dump Scythe. Just silly shit like that, or it's like my Baron's gonna summon back Spell Cancel because I dumped it off Beatrice. You know what I mean? Just like ignorant stuff like that. And it's like, well, that wouldn't have been enabled. Actually, that's a lie. It would have been enabled by that the shitty 6 that summons back from grave. But Baron's definitely the nicer one to do it with.
The rank 6, yeah. That card's not great, so it's fine. If they're using that, it's not as egregious.
Yeah. So for the next card was what I think. What about the 2 cards that are like do similar kind of things, and that's Dimensional Shifter and Drool and Lockbird.
Sure.
We saw in Dimensional Shifter, we saw Japan put that card to 2. We still have it at 3. I it's weird that a lot of people have a huge problem with Shifter, but I hate it significantly less than a lot of other people because I think it's a card that works in very specific decks. But I can understand, like, it's one of those cards that, like, when you draw it, it makes your opponent's deck not function for a turn, and that's usually all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, it being the turn skip is very like upsetting. I'm sure we've seen it like time after time, where you get shifted and you're just like, well, I guess like there's playback to shifter, right? But then it's just like if your opponent's deck is doing something unfair alongside shifter, I think everything sort of like piles itself down. Whereas
Mhm.
traditionally, when we see cards like shifter, you don't necessarily see someone do anything, particularly like
Like,
unfair, or like fair, even
decks
like
that can use
Shifter
Shifter tend
came out, it was just
most
like
of the time.
unplayable, right? Like that was the whole thing.
Yeah. So that's why I would be upset if Shifter gets hit before Drone Lockbird, because Drone
Mm.
Lockbird effectively does a similar thing, which shuts down your opponent's deck for one turn, except this card
Mm.
can be used in basically every deck. And so if they look at this and say, "Oh, people have been playing lots of Dimensional Shifter over the past year, but not a lot of people have been playing a lot of Drone Lockbird," and they hit Dimensional Shifter, I'm gonna be pretty pissed because Drone Lockbird is about to be very strong in this upcoming format, and anytime Drone Lockbird is good in a format, I think that format is absolutely terrible.
It's I think the other like thing that you bring up as well, like compared to Shifter, is like they knew that Shifter would be a problem if you're able to chain, like not chain multiple Shifter, obviously, like that can come up, but more so the fact of oh, you have Shifter, it's like you can't shift when you draw two of them, but you can draw twice if you draw two draw, right?
Yes.
So it's like you draw them, turn skip, do something mildly oppressive, draw, turn skip again in some instances. Whereas like shifter doesn't give you that luxury. And I think that's like not a big selling point for me to want to have draw to exist, but I don't think it's like a major one. It's just like another like it's like icing on the cake, right? Where it's just like this card shouldn't exist because of what it does, but also it's archaic card design from 12 years ago, and
Mhm.
we have like all these nice restrictions on cards like that now, so I'm okay with it.
So outside of those, something that Japan did and we haven't, and I'm not sure if we will, is like the Bestials. Like they limited all the
Mm.
Bestials to one. We have all of the Bestials, and if they go and hit some of the other cards, like the other decks, I think it is reasonable that we might see like Magnuma to one.
Mm, I don't think we need to. That might be a more like down the line sort of thing if they deem it necessary. Because like I feel like if we didn't see it after Tour Element format, we probably aren't likely to see it now. Yeah,
No,
does that
no, no,
sound reasonable?
no. I agree. I'm thinking.
Because like
I'm speaking
representation
more
wise, right?
of saying like, okay, we hit like the top three decks.
Mm.
What's left? And we like, oh, here's like branded and like these Bestial
Oh
cards.
yeah, sure. I don't think I don't want to say they don't have the foresight, but there's definitely been some like things that I think they've neglected going into formats after they've done a really really big like just hit, right?
Hmm.
Like when they've hit like multiple decks and they've just spread everything out. It's like, yeah, but you forgot this one, and then you just have like a really bad like next 3 months or something where it's like this is running rampant.
Yeah.
And that's like a point of concern. Um, but yeah, like I could see it happening. Uh, I don't know if Magnemut's like even enough, right? Like, does Brandon even play multiple Bestials anymore? Like, not really.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think
Yeah.
he would.
Like every list I've seen plays like one Saronir and then sometimes Lubellion, sometimes
Yes.
neither, sometimes Regain. You know what I mean? Like it's just like very very weird when it comes to hitting those cards specifically. So I'm not sold. I think you would also maybe have like just given how their utility works. It's like you if you put stuff to one, it would have to be Magnuma just by default. But like I think if they become like a real issue, you probably have to ban at least one of them, and it might just be Rebellion. But I think
Mhm.
that's the only thing that would stand out to me, though. But yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about.
So
Thankfully, we probably won't have to worry about it for a good period of time.
yeah, I don't think so either. The last card on my list of singletons, there might be more I'm forgetting, is a card that is semi-limited in Japan, but not here. That's Pot of Prosperity. This card is
Mm.
incredibly strong. That I think the biggest thing this card has going for it is the ability to go 6 cards deep to grab really problematic side cards. I
Yeah,
think,
that I've noticed that happen a lot more in a lot of the Purrely decks, right? Because they have like the non-engine spots, and then post side it's like, well, we're going first. Let's so instead of putting in people were doing like cards like Trap Trick, right?
Mhm.
But now you could just do all these other cards that are solely good going first. You have your really good main deck that like can function going first, but like going second is a different ball game. Um, but then they also just have Prosp, and
Yes.
like that's when it gets kind of scary, right? Like that's where I'm like, oh, are you gonna hit all of the problem cards? Like you should. Like you should probably hit D barrier. Like that's a card that doesn't need to exist. It's only ever gonna be used to be hateful. But at that point, yeah, I think Prosp is probably a reasonable hit, for sure. And we've seen it with other pots as well, right? Like
Right,
it's
yeah,
not
so we have
anything
desires
new.
at 2, but I think another reason why this card might end up going to 2 is also the fact of how strong and how consistent it makes the the Kashtira deck. Because not only does
Mm,
it function as a way to get you to the pieces you need to play, but it also has the secondary unintended function of being able to use extra deck
mm.
monsters as materials for a Rise Heart
That is
to let you.
definitely one that was neglected for a long time, I think. That like
Yeah,
Yeah.
is finally just a pretty big issue. I agree
yeah.
completely.
So now it's like it lets you, if you have prosperity, now you're a rise heart. If their opponent deals with it, lets you pop your opponent's cards on your turn, draw cards, and do extra stuff. So now it's like a rise heart gets to banish your opponent's cards, draw a card, and pop an additional card later. Um, I think that hit would also take down the Kashtira deck if they didn't want to go heavy handed on the Kashtira hits. You know what I mean? It's like an unintended or like a side
Mm.
effect. So like you can hit the pot of prosperity, which will lower the probability of Kashtira opening their good Kashtira monsters, which sometimes is already a problem. Like Ryan, Ryan. Anytime Ryan plays a Kashtira deck, he'll draw 6 cards, and none of them are Kashtira monsters. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh,
It's been known to happen.
uh,
It
so
is
yeah,
very
I don't know why you
depressing.
said that as if it was like a personal problem I have. Like I don't know, but yeah, it's like yeah, Ryan Stee's not drawing any Kashtira monsters. Like yeah, I guess.
So yeah, I mean, I think on top of like the cashier hits of like unicorn plus whatever additional card they decide to do and pot of prosperity, I think that's probably the way to go. Are there any singleton cards you guys oh, there was one other one but this was a card that I think should be hit down the line, especially after they revealed something in Japan, and that is the Ceruli Dark World.
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, that's yeah. Yeah.
we haven't seen Dark World do overwhelmingly well, but it is a thing that like we're talked about with the branded deck. For the health of the game, what do you like want to do? Even this deck isn't good, this one deck does this super unfair thing, and I think they should just ban Ceruli. So because again, it gives it a card to your opponent, and it does something crazy.
Yes, it gives a card to your opponent
No,
and it
I
tricks
I
the
I
game into
agree.
thinking your opponent is using your effects. Like, yeah.
I think that would be very reasonable. And I think that is again the only card that is in that deck that is like truly being used for evil, right? Like
Yes.
Dark World itself isn't doing anything super duper oppressive, just more of like turbo draw end board, similar to what we see with all these other decks. Like when it is going off and not resolving Ceruli.
Hmm.
Um, I think for me, I think so. There's a bunch of weird things that I think can be hit, and these would just be like fixes that don't have any negative effect on anything. I think you can ban the super heavy samurai that enables the FTK. Its name escapes me, but it's a little
Oh,
fellow
the
with
one
the
you
hat.
banish it from grave to burn them, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think if you ban that entirely, no one cries, right? I think Gothams is also a very funny card and could probably just be banned because I feel like every time one of these combos shows up, it involves Gothams. And now we have the Vernasos, which you if you open the the Ultra. I can't remember its name. That one turns into the duck, and the duck turns into another one, and that's 3 instances where you can resolve Gotems, right? And that's just silly. So I think Gotems is like a reasonable one to hit. I also think stuff like Eradicate. So these are like obviously long time coming ones, and like they're not doing anything now. But I don't think these cards should really exist at all. But when you look at the virus cards, I don't think they're ever doing anything good for
I
the
want them to
game.
ban literally all the virus. They're just so
Yeah.
stupid, and it's like
And
they banned the
cards
Neurotic
that
Crush
say
card, and
cards
it's
that
just
say
like,
you drew the wrong hand, I think are very
yeah,
silly, right?
I
Like
don't
with
like
like no
them.
real playback or anything. I think that's where
Yeah,
it becomes really awkward, and that's like kind of upsetting. Um, hmm.
I
Let me
definitely
think if there's
think
anything
it's
crazy.
just it's very interesting to me that they banned Crush card and then
Hmm.
just deck deving Eradicator. Just yeah. It's like I feel like those are better a lot of the time.
Yeah,
It's
so
just in
Yeah.
different decks. You know?
there's a card in the new set I did kind of want to talk about that we didn't get to that I'm
Mm-hmm.
surprised they did make a secret rare because they love doing this, and it's the new Trap Trick card. It's like Trap
Oh,
Truck or
trap
something.
track or something. Yeah.
Trap Track,
Yeah.
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 And that card is just like Trap Trick without having to play extra copies of trap cards, where it just says destroy a monster you control, set a normal trap from your deck, and you can activate it this turn. So
Does
going
it have the
first,
same restriction if it's the only trap you can play, or does it not have
I
that
actually
restriction?
don't think it does. Trap
I believe the
Tracks.
Japanese name was trap track, but I do
What
not know.
rarity is this card?
No, it does. It's a common, and I'm surprised because they love
Oh, that is
making cards like this
shocking.
to be
Yeah,
rare.
I would have assumed it was not be a common. Yeah.
And you can only activate one trap card for the rest of the turn.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
So it does. Not that
So
that matters that much. It
How
just
is
means
that
you can't
card
play
a
it and be like
common?
crazy. Yeah, I know, right? How is it a common? Yeah, I don't know. That is crazy, actually.
so because of that, like we're getting like more of these kind of cards that let you do unfair things with like these normally unsearchable powerful cards, and do not like that one bit.
Yeah.
That just sounds so. Oh my! I forgot this card existed. God, that's so dumb. Yeah, even more reason to ban Eradicator or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Pretty much,
Yeah,
right?
I definitely think Eradicator could stay on, go onto the forbidden list. It probably
and then
won't because
I
we haven't seen it, but
exactly. I think as well we went over like the Notoria Beasts and stuff like that. I think those are also kind of silly. That's like pretty reasonable. I think everyone sort of feels the same way. We don't need these like crazy negate end boards, and like we saw that with tier. Tier wasn't generating negate end boards; it was more interactive, right?
yes.
So like if we have more decks like Rika that aren't having negate boards, and it's like this card is tributing your guy, this card is flipping the trap and tributing your guy, just silly shit like that. Like I think those sort of decks are always like pretty reasonable because there is playback, there is interaction. Maybe not all the time, but it's more than I negate this, you can't play. Yeah, that's where it gets kind of silly. But like when it's just like you have to time it correctly, and it's like, do I attribute this monster or do I attribute this one? It's like, no, I have 4 negates, I can negate everything. But yeah, I think that those are like my big ones. But yeah, like for the upcoming format, that's like the other sort of thing. I don't think there's anything I want to hit that might stop Purrely. I don't think Purrely is going to be particularly like oppressive in the grand scheme of things, but maybe I'm incorrect and it is just like highly represented because there's a lot of hype behind it. That'll be
There's a lot of
interesting
hype
to
around it.
see.
Yeah, there is. I would say it is like kind of crazy how much hype there is around it versus like
Yeah.
the other stuff. But maybe it's not crazy. Maybe that's just what that
What do
is.
you think you do in the first wave of Purrely hits? I'm trying to figure that out. Like I think it has to be the same as Cash with like consistency hits, right? Like that's the only thing that makes sense. Like if you're limiting
So
um
the thing was with Pearly
mm,
in Japan, the new spell card is really what pushes it over the top. Like yes, the Pearly Lily is like extremely good, but
mm.
the fact that the sleepy memory, so 2 of the memories you can only activate if you already have a card on the field.
Yeah.
It's just the
That's what I
one
was thinking.
that
You hit the
lets you
ones that don't
play
require you to have it, right?
without having a
Mm.
card in the field, and it's the card that lets you stack up to 6 draws during your opponent's turn. So I think that if they go with consistency hits, you just put that card to 1,
Yeah, I'm
and
okay with that.
which means you have less ways to get started without committing cards to the field, and I think it's probably fine. Or I think if they could go with a weird way and ban Purrely Plump.
Yeah, I don't want to look at bans for this deck yet.
Well, we're not talking about right away. I'm talking about like
Well,
if,
no,
if
no, no, no. I mean, like even for like the next wave, because I can't. What did they hit on the first Salamangreat like rotation?
They limited
They hit
Gazelle,
Gazelle, they hit Stalio, right?
Gazelle and
Circle.
Circle, yeah.
When did they ban Stalio? Was that
When they banned every
2020?
other deck, yeah.
When
They banned
every other
Stalio
deck,
when
Yeah,
they
okay.
banned
When did they ban Gazelle?
they did not ban Gazelle.
That ban Gazelle.
They never banned Gazelle? What am I thinking of? Revisionist history. No,
Not
okay,
yet.
no, you're right. So they just hit
God.
Gazelle and they hit Circle and they still had the full power deck, right? Okay. What if they put Ultra Rare Purrely, not Lily to 1? That would be kind of average. I don't know.
I mean, so if they just want to hit, they would just hit the
Yeah,
the
they would hit
beauty memory, and they'd hit
My
the what?
Friend Purrely or something, right?
No. It would just you would just hit beauty, and the
Oh,
beauty
yeah, no,
memory
you're right.
and
No, you hit the
what's
spells
one,
because then they
those are
can't
the ones
reveal
that
3, right?
yes, they can't reveal 3 of the same, but also those are the
Yeah.
ones that you can activate without having cards on the field.
With that, yeah. No, that was my first instinct as well. Like, I think that's also maybe why they put those cards at such low rarity in a core set, like the new Pearly stuff, and obviously like the new super heavy Samurai stuff. Maybe that's why it's like low rarity because they can hit it if it becomes an issue, and like no one will cry.
Mm-hmm.
Like that could be that could be their game plans. Like, yeah, we fucked up. Japan fucked up. Who knows? So yeah, that would be my instinct. I think. Yeah. Like,
Topic of Purrely and banning cards. I think a card that could be banned is also Secret Village of the Spellcasters.
yeah, I'm okay with that too.
Again, only
I
card
think
used for
Rainbow
evil
Village.
and Rainbow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Rainbow card with
Yeah.
letting you search it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I
We
don't
can't
like.
ban
Yeah,
Rainbow
I
Bridge
agree.
already. We can't. Come on.
I think Rainbow Bridge itself is fine, and then I think it's when you get into like the ignorant field spells. But then obviously it's like,
I feel like surely you ban terraforming before you ban Rainbow Bridge. Like let's be
yeah,
real
that's
here.
what I mean.
You know,
Like,
let's think about this. Like,
well, Ryan, if you
be
discard
reasonable.
terraforming for a Purrely spell,
shut up.
you get nothing. But if you discard Rainbow Bridge,
shut your mouth.
you get everything.
Yeah.
So that covers all the cards on my list. I
Yeah.
think it covers Bohdan's. I don't know if Ryan has any.
Shockingly, I don't think. Oh, Harvey's Featherstorm.
Oh,
Can we just enough is enough, right? Like, can we just, man, I hate that card. This isn't even. I don't just. That's it. Yeah, that's all I got. I was thinking like, man, what's the last card I lost to that made me angry? It's like Harvey's Featherstorm.
Yes,
that's the last card I lost to where I just went, man, like, why does this card exist?
Yeah. No, yeah. I can agree with that too. It's just a lot of stuff like that, huh? Like,
just the turn skip traps are just not fun. Like, and I don't know why they ever existed, but and it's just weird when they're like not played for so long, and then randomly they just line up against a lot of decks, and then they're just infuriating, and it's like, all right, fine, maybe enough is enough.
Enough is enough, and we know what else is enough.
This, yeah, I think we covered everything.
Yeah. We covered everything. I think we did.
Finally,
yeah.
I can go to bed.
All right, yeah. So, I don't really have any ideas for what we're gonna do next time, so I don't have much of an outro. I'm gonna say, should have said this in the beginning. Maybe I'll even edit this into the beginning of it, but probably not. Is comment the cards you want to see from Cyberstorm Access and cards you want forbidden. That'll get some engagement to anybody who listened to this for an hour and 54 minutes. But we'll see. Maybe I'll edit this to the beginning, but probably not. I don't trust myself.
We still also have to create a like kind of like Google form or email for people to send us questions.
Yes, we also do that.
Yeah.
But I think that's all I got here. We covered a lot, actually, more than I thought we would. in about
Well,
as much time as I thought we would.
Well,
but
that
yeah.
not me. I knew this is how this would go.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening, and we will see you